Well, good morning. I guess you didn't close down the bar if you're sitting here. If you did close down the bar, raise your hand, we'll clap for you. No? Okay, you guys are all the responsible people in the room, so that's fantastic. It's late 2021. I've been excited about how things have been progressing this year. My kids are wearing masks in school, and all of the notifications I've been receiving over email have gone down since they put those masks back on about exposures. It's been really great. But in 2020 and in 2021 in particular, I think there have been two questions that we have been asking ourselves over and over and over again. Maybe our subconsciouses have been asking these questions, but those questions are, what should we fear and who's to blame? These questions rise up inside of all of the media that we're consuming all of the time. What should we fear? Right now, there are newspaper editors going through all of the potential topics that are coming across their desk, and they're looking which ones are going to get clicks, which ones are going to get eyeballs, and the ones that generate a fear response inside of us are the ones that get pushed to the top of each of those publications. We're all consuming news all the time. Who's on Twitter? Anyone on Twitter? Yes, you're my people. We're on Twitter all the time, right? Like I'm sitting in school pickup line, or I'm waiting in the grocery line, and I open up that app and I'm looking to see like what's going on, which celebrity passed away or put their foot in their mouth or did something wild. We're consuming all of this information all of the time, in part because we have responses to what's happening. We need to know, what should I be afraid of right now? Is there weather coming in that's going to knock some chairs around on my deck tonight? Should I be afraid of the weather? Is it the kind of thing I need to evacuate for? How are things going? We are constantly living inside of an environment that's asking us to fear things. And really, ultimately, what we're living in is a society of scarcity. It's a whole lot more than just all of the things flying off the shelves. Scarcity is actually about the questions that we're asking about what's enough. The question of, am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Are my kids smart enough? Are they going to get into the schools that I want them to get into? Am I trained enough? Do I know enough? Am I connected enough? Are we funded enough? These are the questions we're constantly asking ourselves because we are living inside of a scarcity mindset, inside of a scarcity society that is asking us to constantly question whether or not we have enough. This plays directly into who we are as individuals. Our core identities get built, and we are able to really apply labels to ourselves that we feel comfortable talking about with other people. So when I tell you that I'm a runner, and I'm not a runner, by the way, but if I were a runner, I used to be before this foot thing started really irritating me, right? I'm a runner. How do you know you're a runner? Well, the answer is that you have enough proof. What's the proof that you have that you're a runner? Well, I've got the gear. I've got my Brooks shoes. They're my favorites. They're very cushiony. Got to buy them from the old ladies store. That's where I go, get my shoes. I've got a plan. I wake up every day at a certain time, so my alarm is set. I'm tracking my mileage on my apps. I'm signing up for races. I've joined a running club. I read Runner's Magazine. I do recovery. I'm rolling every night. I've got checkups. I've got proof that I'm a runner. Our core identities, the things that we describe ourselves as when we get up in front to have a conversation and we're shaking hands outside of this room and someone says, oh, what do you do? Well, you start labeling yourself right away. You give yourself labels. Well, I'm a GP at a VC, or I'm a founder at a startup. And the question is, how can you create that label for yourself? Well, you have proof that that label is accurate. I'm going to talk this morning about the evidence of your identity being your behavior and how that plays into the number of female founders we have in our space. Right now, the evidence of our identity is our behavior. The things that we do, for instance, if you're a CEO, I make major decisions. I communicate with the board. I'm in charge of all the big relationships that we have going on. I solve the big, ugly problems. Or if I'm a founder, I formed and established a business. I went through all that paperwork. I sent it to somewhere in Delaware. I don't know what was going on there, but I got it all set up. I got some paperwork back. I'm hiring people. I have ideas. I'm talking with people who are going to help fund me. I know I'm a founder. I know I'm a CEO. I know I'm an ISTJ because of these behaviors that prove who I am. The question that we have to think about today in terms of the behavior of founders is really around female founders and whether or not they possess these same exact characteristics and behaviors as male founders. There's an interesting study that was done around the behavior of CEOs. And oftentimes, the CEO behaviors are the same behaviors we're looking for in founders, right? Here are these behaviors. Take initiative, resilience, practices self-development, drives for results, displays high integrity and honesty. In this study that was done by Joseph Faulkner and a colleague, they surveyed thousands of individuals inside of companies to say, what do you believe about these behaviors for CEO founders versus men and women? Who possesses them? And 17 out of these behaviors, women beat out men. In only 2 categories, men beat out women. The margins are small, though. If women possess 17 of these behaviors more than men, why do we have less women sitting in CEO or founder tables? What's happening here inside of our society? This is the question that we're going to look at today. And I think it's very important that we think about exactly what's going on. Because a lot of times what gets fed to women, and I happen to be one, what gets fed to women is that we're just not confident enough. That if we were to simply recognize these behaviors inside of ourselves and then step into the roles that are in front of us, that we would be able then to be equal to our male counterparts. Is that really what's going on? Well, it's interesting that in this study, where women rate themselves as less confident than men, you can see on this chart here, men are sitting as the top line there on the left, and women are beneath them. It takes a woman to get to her mid-40s before she has the same confidence as an early 20s male. I found this so interesting, that with identical credentials, but lacking experience, when men and women look at a job that they could possibly do, a woman will come to a different conclusion than a man about whether or not she should apply. So the question is, are women just suffering from imposter syndrome? Is that what's going on here? We know imposter syndrome, right? We've been talking about this a lot inside of psychology. Originally, imposter syndrome, all of the research that was done around women. They were trying to figure out, why are women less confident than men? Why don't they step into the roles that they're clearly prepared to do? And as this study was going on, of course it was discovered that men also suffer from imposter syndrome. And of course, this is a good thing. It's probably only sociopaths who are walking around thinking, I can do anything at all, at any point, right? We don't really like these people who walk into a space and say, I could master all of this. It's very good and very human in the best way to question ourselves and to wonder if we're any good at what we're about to do. But if this is the case, that men and women are both suffering from imposter syndrome, or at least from questioning ourselves and whether or not we can do a good job, then what is it? Why do we have fewer women becoming founders? And why are female careers stalled? Is it parental leave? Is it pay equity? I'm going to go over 6 societal issues that have moved women away from being the central character in founding stories and that keep women from having voices on the inside. Now, before we get into these 6 things, I want to talk to you a little bit about one idea. And it's the reason why you should care if there are women sitting at decision-making tables. You might be sitting there and thinking, yeah, we should have equality. That's a very good idea. Equality sounds great, but here's the thing. What I really care about is whether or not people are successful. So if women are great at the job and they can get the job done, then great, they can have a seat. But look, 9 times out of 10, I know a guy that can get that job done better. I'm going to hire him. Let me tell you that if it doesn't motivate you enough to just want to have equality, that women-led startups, when they do get funded, are more likely to be successful. They ultimately deliver higher revenue, more than twice as much per dollar invested. If you didn't care because you didn't care about equality, you should care about the bottom line. So walk with me. We're going to go through 6 different ideas about why women are not included in our founding stories and how we, us here in this room, and the networks of people that we are in contact with can bring about change around this idea. The very first one that we're going to talk about today is bias. And as you can imagine, bias is an uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people. But walk with me through this thought process. When you think about male founders, can you think about the founder who's angry and hard-charging? He's like Khrushchev taking off his shoe and pounding the table, and everyone gives him space to be himself because, like, that's the quirky guy. That's what he does. He's just brash. You can think about the guy who's wearing the 3-piece suit and hops in his private jet, but he takes someone takes a photo of him before he gets on the jet and they post it on social media. He's Mr. Flashy. And then we also have the guy who shows up in a hoodie and sneakers and disheveled hair, and we think, oh, how cool. He's a cool guy. For men, we allow them to have a wide range of confidence around how they show up in a space. And for women, the executive presence tends to be a monolith. When I was cutting my teeth in the financial wealth management space, I went to Schwab's large conference called Impact, and while I was there for the very first time, I could not believe what I was experiencing. There were men, primarily men dressed quite well, but there was not a woman on the floor who wasn't in stilettos. And this is a huge hall. We were in Boston. It was very rainy and cold, and there were every woman to a person was walking this huge conference floor in 4-inch heels. And I just could not get over it. Why are they doing this? I know they're in pain. I've got stilettos myself. I know that at the end of this day, they are going to feel actual pain. But the men are walking around, and they've got great, comfortable shoes on, and there's a huge difference in what they're wearing. We've got the Patagonia vest, we've got the 3-piece suit, but women were all dressed to the nines. And it's because for women, we are showing up as a monolith inside of spaces so that we can be taken seriously. What does executive presence mean when someone says it? They walk into a boardroom, they're trying to command executive presence. We live in a nation where 46 out of 46 leaders have all been male, and 45 of them white. When we say someone looks presidential, what does that term mean? How do we think about the words we're using and the ways we think about others? How are we addressing the unknown, unspoken biases that exist inside of our worlds? I'm standing here as a white woman with a Eurocentric model of professionalism, just like all of us are working inside of. But I want to be really clear that while it's affecting me, it's affecting women of color in a much greater way. And that the microaggressions that they face inside of a work environment are much heightened compared to my own. Biases have been demonstrated in all professional fields. One working paper study of over 500,000 physician referrals showed that women surgeons receive fewer referrals after successful outcomes than male surgeons. Women economists are less likely to receive tenure the more they co-author papers with men. And an analysis at a large company found that women's as well as minority men's performance was effectively discounted compared to that of white men's. If we're going to take a look at what's happening inside of our founding stories, and we're going to look at the faces that are sitting there, we're going to have to look at the biases that we have inside of ourselves and try to unearth them. It's not comfortable, by the way. That's not a pleasant moment to sit back and think, how have I contributed unknowingly to biased thought or biased outcomes? But the first step we have to take is about introspection and examining our own thoughts and our own behaviors towards bias. Number 2 is the pet to threat phenomenon. Dr. Keisha Thomas coined this term, and it goes a little something like this. You come to something like this experience and you hear like, oh, women founders get better performance, so we've got to do something about this. What should we do? Let's hire somebody. We'll bring them in. They'll be our consultant, but they're one of us. They can tell us what's going on, and we can make some ground here. We'll move this needle together. So you go out, you do a great search, you hire somebody, they get brought in, and initially everyone's very excited. We maybe even put out a press release about the new initiative we're doing. We're telling everybody what's going on. And then they start doing their job. And their job is literally to come in and question your status quo. That's what you hired them to do. Talk about discomfort. To bring someone in and have them point out the areas where you're doing it wrong. Holy cow, is that hard? Pretty soon, other members of your team are saying, whoa, this gal, she is stirring the pot. And I don't like it. And nobody likes it. So you look for ways to settle it down because the team is too rowdy now. There's too many emotions going on. You can't even get your work done because everybody's emotionally charged hearing that they're doing it wrong. So you find a way to mitigate what's happening. And then they wind up completely marginalized. This scenario has to get cut off right where that status quo is being questioned before you figure out a way to mitigate the threat. We have to start having language and words and processes that allow people to identify, discuss, and solve the real problems that are going on inside of your organization. How to swing doors wider. How to get more and better information out of the people inside of your organization. How are we allowing women inside of our organizations to exist in large ways? How are we giving them room to fail? How are we allowing ourselves to feel uncomfortable through the process? White leaders inviting this work should expect to be uncomfortable to do the courageous work of change. We have to start executing on all of the values that we claim to possess. Number 3, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Gaslight with Angela Lansbury. Anybody? Yes. She was a teenager when she did it. So like Angela Lansbury, she's a true treasure. The story isn't just a story about a woman whose husband is lying to her. The story is about a husband who is trying to convince the wife that she's crazy. He's stealing family jewels. It's a little bit complicated and a little hokey, but it's become a cultural touchstone. Gaslighting isn't just about people lying to one another. It's about actually trying to make people feel like they don't know what's happening, like they're going crazy. Gaslighting happens inside of our organizations when we say things like, hey, we're all over here on the other side of this glass wall. Come on over with us. Come join us over here. And so you walk up to the door and you try to open it, and it won't budge. Recently, I was at Wando High School here in Mount Pleasant, and my daughter needed to use the restroom. So we went downstairs underneath, and if you know anything about the Low Country, it's very humid here. So we go into the bathroom, and I'm trying to open the door for her. We're both trying to open doors to get into stalls. And these doors they're just absolutely swollen shut. You cannot get them to budge. She's 8, she's scrawny little kid, and she's pushing and pushing, and that door would not move. So I told her to stand back, and I put all of my weight against it, and whoosh, that door flew open, and she was able to go inside. But if you're in the bathroom with your kid, you should also take a moment and go yourself. So I thought, okay, I'll just go. So I go to the next door, same deal, so I push all my weight against it, and I just fly off of it. And I started laughing. That door was locked because someone was inside. Here's the thing, is that moment is happening for people inside of our organizations. They're being told, just push harder, do more behaviors, get up at 4 a.m., take that cold shower, find your bootstraps. And the truth is that the door is locked. No amount of pushing is going to allow them inside. Those of us standing on the other side have to go unlock the door before they can come inside. We have to stop telling people that it's possible to become a founder and succeed only on merit. All of us who are holding power have to find a way to open our hands and to allow people to walk into them. Check the numbers. So this is the part that I'm super bad at because I don't do math in public. But we're going to talk through some numbers real quickly. 35% of VC firms have a female partner. And only 2.3% of those firms have a female decision maker sitting at the table when they make decisions. The high watermark for this was in 2019 when we hit 2.8. Woo! What a great moment. That's wild, right? 2.8 was the high watermark for the number of women sitting at the table. Most firms don't have a single female partner, according to the analysis that was done last year. And of all partners at these firms, the ones who are female founding partners have control of an outsized portion of the firm's investment decisions, still with men. This lack of gender equality in funding startups leads to greater problems because it affects the overall jobs picture for women exponentially. When you have women who are founders and women sitting in decision-making spots of your firm, you wind up with more women working inside of them by 6x. We tend to hire people who we understand. We tend to hire people who look like us. And we have to think about key hires inside of our firms so that we wind up with diverse and obviously higher profitability inside of our firm. Number 5, recognizing communities of qualified people. I don't know about you, but I love to listen to podcasts and hear people's founding stories. It's one of my favorite things to do, to hear about how you got here. Having a founding story that's concise is really important, but having a founding story that excludes all of the people whose shoulders you are standing on to get where you are today doesn't help anyone but you. We should be careful of founding stories that erase the people who have paved a path for them to be where they are today. We should ask the questions, whose work are you standing on? What research are you using to draw these conclusions? For my talk today, Dr. Tina Opie, Dr. Keisha Thomas, Jessica Nordell, Siri Chalazi, Jack Zenger, Joseph Folkman, Heather Sarsens, Brene Brown, James Clear, Jody Ann Burry, Ruchika Tulshian, Allison Wilner, Jason Rupp, so many more have contributed to me being able to stand here today and talk to you about what's happening inside of all of our firms. Those names matter, and we shouldn't leave them off. As we think about the communities that we're building, we need to think about the contributing people to our success. We need to look for ways to continue to open the door for them inside of our own lives. Finally, I would be remiss if I wasn't talking about caregiving. Obviously, right now in the US, we have a major conversation that's happening, and in particular, a VC founder has, or a VC investor has weighed in on this issue. It's not a surprise to anyone sitting in this room that the pandemic really revealed this truth to us, that when women dropped out of the workforce in the summer of 2020, it was largely disproportionate to the men dropping out. Women needed to go home to handle Zoom school, to be with their kids, and the equality was not there among their husbands' support. Even those who claim egalitarian mindsets around how they're working inside of their home still fell to normal party line ideas around who should be doing caregiving inside the home. Perhaps you know this already, but in the US, in half of our states, you cannot separate a puppy from its mother for the first 6 weeks of life. We don't have any regulation or any assistance for women who stay home for their own children that's federally mandated. How are we establishing caregiving as a societal need? Do we have safety nets socially for people who have great ideas, wonderful founding ideas, ideas that will change our lives and create the world we actually want to be living in, that help them where they need it most, in the space of caregiving? Giving women the space and time, positions and experience to practice the behaviors we already know that they possess of these very same skills of caregiving, that's what will make them excellent CEOs. That's what will make them excellent founders. How are we going to personally make that space available to them? I'm going to end with the story of Rabbi Akiva. He was a rabbi in the 1st century, and he actually was not literate until he met his wife. And she helped him learn how to read. And because he wasn't literate until an adult, he spent a lot of time memorizing Torah. And he would walk the city with his head down, memorizing. And one day, without realizing it, he walked right up to a Roman outpost. And a Roman guard yells out to him, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Startled, Rabbi Akiva looks up and he says, "How much do they pay you to ask me that question?" The Roman guard says, 2 drachma. And Rabbi Akiva responds, he says, "I'll pay you double to stand outside my door and ask me those 2 questions every day. Who are you? What are you doing here?" Thanks so much.